105 WBEZ, I am Justin Kaufmann. If this were a normal year, many of us would be making the annual trip to Springfield for the Illinois State Fair. Which is really, if you think about it, it's got 4-H club, political rallies, live music, not to mention carnival rides. You know what I'm talking about, the Ferris wheel, the tilt-a-whirl, the dumble ride, the carousel, fireball. But of course, due to the pandemic, the state fairs, street festivals, and carnivals, well, they're not on the agenda. Chicago writer Michael Sean Comerford spent a full year traveling from state to state, city to city with carnivals for his new book, American Oz. He set up and tore down the carnivals. He operated the rides. He spent time getting to know carnies and carnival culture, including right here in Chicago, where the American Carnival began. I have a particular interest in Michael's story. See, my grandfather, who I never met, he died well before I was born. He was a carny, a roustabout, as my dad has told me. He worked out west during the Depression, and like I said, even though we never met, I saw glimpses of him in this book. Michael Comerford joins us now. Michael, welcome to Reset.
It's an honor. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Great to have you. So first, the history. It's interesting that when I say, Chicago being the birthplace of the American Carnival, that's true in the sense that it was a World's Fair that brought carnivals to America.
Right. In 1893, we had the World's Columbian Exposition, and at that time, the first midway along Midway Plaisance, along the right through the mid-center of University of Chicago. And at that time, there was this amazing period of technological revolution where they had outdoor lighting coming into play. They had the first midway. They had this setup that where they had sideshows along the side, and they had the first Ferris wheel that had 2,000 people could be on a single Ferris wheel. And entrepreneurs decided, hey, we're going to put this idea on wheels, and they went around the country with outdoor lighting, with Ferris wheels and carousels, and this is really where Chicago is where the traveling carnival began.
This trek, this state-to-state trek, it's amazing to think about how many miles that you hitchhike and rode trains and buses and traveled with the carnivals. Where did this idea come from?
It came years ago. I'm slightly adventurous myself. I was bicycling across the country. I stopped in Cody, Wyoming. I worked in a carnival for a weekend. I saw these people. They seemed like amazing traveling secrets, and I became fascinated with them. And when I was transitioning out of newspaper reporting, I decided, well, let's start to write books and let's revisit this idea. And I went and visited a lot of states. I'll go through them if you don't mind.
Sure.
I started in California. I wanted to start actually where there was a great economic divide in Silicon Valley. So I went from California to New Jersey to New York to Chicago to Alaska to Minnesota to Oklahoma to Texas to Georgia and to Florida, where I was in a freak show, but I wasn't on stage because they didn't see the inner freak in me.
You were denied as part of the freak show.
I was denied the stage. As you well know, that is a humiliating thing.
Well, Michael, it's interesting because you read chapter to chapter, and you do the way you set out the book is that you do talk about the specific, examples and the specific stories of each part of the trek. And it is interesting to see that the culture of the traveling carnival, a lot of it's the same, but a lot of it is different. A lot of it is the even down to the vernacular and the way that people interact with each other are different from state to state.
Absolutely, and I stress this in the book, American Oz, which is my roommates in Alaska were Native Americans, and they were, they came from tiny fishing villages. And at the same time, within the same year, I was in, my boss was from the Bronx, and another, Silicon Valley is where I was playing. So these kids were all high-tech smartphones and so forth, and then down in the Deep South. So as different as people are, carnivals were different. And you brought up your family. I bring up also that, amazingly, carnivals are family-oriented, not only to the public, but within their ranks. And there's a lot of families that are traveling. And so if you have a Southern family, well, they're going to be acting much differently than a Yupik family or a family out in actually in Englewood. You know,
right. A lot of the book does take place in Chicago, and I want to get to it in just a second. Michael Comerford is my guest. He wrote the book American Oz, an astonishing year inside traveling carnivals at state fairs and festivals, hitchhiking from California to New York, Alaska to Mexico. When I think the word carnies, it's a negative connotation in this country, and for whatever reason we. I don't know why it's collective kind of looking down at the people who go from traveling carnival to traveling carnival. And a lot of your book is digging into that, digging into who these people are, profiling who the nicknames and the people that work on these teams. And as you kind of point out in the book, it is family. It does pull out, and you start to recognize and relate to the Americans that work in this way.
Well, I wanted to blow apart these stereotypes. And I'm going to bring up someone that maybe you liked to reading at one time, but David Foster Wallace wrote a famous piece for The Atlantic where he went to the Illinois State Fair, and he said of the carnies there that they were itinerant, insular, swarthy, unclean, and not to be trusted. That genetically they had the look that one would associate with fetal alcohol syndrome. And I'm quoting from that article. Now, could you say that of any other group of people?
No.
You just name it. So this is classism. This is caste. This is looking down on the working poor, and that is the root of this. And it does rankle me. It makes me angry because these are some of the most talented. I found artistic people. I found literary people. I found incredibly loving people, and all of them doing the same thing, much of what we're doing in life. They're looking for love, they're looking for meaning in their life, they're looking for all the same things, and only they're doing it on the road. And that's what made them interesting to me.
Well, it was fascinating to read, too, how people had other options. A young woman from Chicago had an option to go to Northwestern, didn't want to go because she was attracted to the carnival. And you pointed out this great moment where, and you said this in the passage, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was they don't want to that carnies don't want to get rich and leave the carnival. They want to get rich and live a better carnival life.
Yeah, many of them do, and like they go, we were asking several times. People would say, what would you do if you ever hit the lottery? And I was struck by how many people said they would come back and own I'd come back and I'd own a carousel, and I just let the carousel. Let the carnies run the carousel for me, or the souvenir joint, and that amazed me. Is that yes, their vision seemed to revolve around, well, this is a great life. I'd just like a better one. I'd like to be an owner.
Michael, take us through a day. For you, for Chicago, for instance, when you showed up in Chicago, and you go and you find the carnival owner. And you're assigned to a spot. Take us through a day of setting up, tearing down, running a ride, that kind of thing.
Well, Chicago was wild because I worked for Modern Midways. And by the way, I really hadn't realized how much of Chicago is named after that original 1893 World's Columbian Exposition Midway Plaisance, the Midway Airport, the Monsters of the Midway. All sorts of hotels and even churches named after Midways. Well, this is Modern Midways I worked for. Their carnival quarters, their carnival bunkhouses, were down in Chicago Heights in a field of 40 Black Angus cows. And so I would get up from this really rotten cow field, and a bunkhouse, and I got out and we got into a van that was very dirty and crowded.
Right.
And
very descriptive in the book.
I described that quite vividly in the book. And then we would go to a neighborhood. And I gotta say, this is really the beauty of these carnivals, is that it really serves the people of Chicago, the streets. And we were listening to the rap songs on the van ride in, and we played Englewood and Gage Park and Humboldt Park for the Puerto Rican Fest, and we played Midway Plaisance.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And that to me was like holy ground. But we would come in the morning and we'd set up the rides. The ride jockeys would test the rides by putting people on the rides at first, so other carnies on the rides, and they'd shake us up really hard and try to get a rise out of us. And then we'd all get ready for the day, and we'd work till whatever, 11 o'clock at night. We'd get in that van, and we'd go back, and some people would stay up later, and I would just collapse.
Michael, as we're talking about your book, American Oz, really an astonishing year inside traveling carnivals at state fairs and festivals. Michael Comerford is my guest. The overall, another stereotype is that these rides and these carnivals are not safe. So many of the rickety rides, whether it's a tilt-a-whirl or maybe a Ferris wheel, and they're put up in a day and they're taken down in a day, and people just kind of have this feeling that it's not safe. And you kind of go into that a little bit in the book, pointing out how that in your travels over that year, you never saw that.
No, I did not, and I was part of an accident, though. So up in Alaska, I ran a Ferris wheel, and the Ferris wheel malfunctioned. It was made here at Eli. It was an Eli wheel down in Jacksonville, Illinois, and it didn't work properly, and people got stuck. And but other than that, and I was the only cause. Other than that, I never saw an accident. Every ride was inspected in every town, and we were super vigilant about ride safety. And I have no hesitancy of going on one or putting my daughter on one.
Michael, what did you learn about yourself from this experience?
Well, I was tested quite a bit, and there was a lot of times when this year was not going to happen. I was fired from my first carnival. I had to get on to 10 different carnivals in 10 different states, and that was really difficult. But in the end of the book, I told you to skip to the end of the book. You have read it, and one of the things I say there, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I learned that play is worthy of stingy time, that imagination must be fattened, and a great carnival can change your DNA. And that these carnival people matter because they're part of us, and we're connected to them, and they're living stories just like us, but their stories move. And so I was welcome, and I felt privileged to be able to write about their lives and to prod them to tell their life stories.
I can only imagine.
Some of them are very, very vivid and dramatic.
Yeah. Michael, just as we wrap up here, I can only imagine, what is lost to the carnival culture when there are no carnivals as we're seeing right now with COVID-19. But from your vantage point, as experiencing it over this year, what is lost? The fact that we don't have this get-together, especially in the Chicago area in summer.
Well, for people, I mean, just as I just repeated, as just said, is that there is joy. Joy is important in people's lives. And so I'm talking beyond my focus mostly was on the as much as your job, as much as your responsibilities, and community, and joy, and fun, and thrills, and fantasy, all those things that carnivals and state fairs and festivals and the street fests. I mean, here in Chicago, we have all these street festivals. They're mini carnivals, and this is all part of what makes us human and makes us happy in life, and that's what it's all about.
Michael Comerford is the author of the new book, American Oz. Thanks for bringing back a little piece of summer for us during this pandemic, Michael. I appreciate you joining us here on Reset.
Very cool, and it's an honor talking with you. Thank you, Justin.